Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over 13 years, and in that time he thought he had seen every possible family dynamic play out on his stage. He had witnessed fierce competition between in-laws, watched siblings argue over answers, and observed the complex relationships that make families both beautiful and complicated. But on this warm afternoon in November 2024, Steve was about to experience something that would leave him completely speechless and force him to confront a situation unlike anything in game show history. What started as a typical episode would transform into a moment of raw truth and unexpected revelation that would remind everyone watching that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones hiding the deepest secrets. Before we explore this extraordinary story of hidden truths, unexpected confessions, and the complicated nature of marriage, if you enjoy these powerful moments that show us the complexity of human relationships, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these incredible stories that reveal the truth about love, sacrifice, and the masks we wear. The Anderson family from Charlotte, North Carolina, stood on one side of the Family Feud stage, ready to compete against the Martinez family from Tampa, Florida. Leading the Anderson family was 38-year-old Rebecca Anderson, a confident woman with an easy smile and the kind of presence that suggested she was used to being in control. Rebecca was a successful pharmaceutical sales representative who had built an impressive career through determination and charisma. Standing beside her were her two teenage children, her younger sister, and her current husband of 3 years, Michael. The family seemed happy and well-adjusted, the kind of contestants that made for good television, because they brought energy and enthusiasm to every round. What nobody in the studio knew was that sitting in the audience, purely by coincidence, was Rebecca's ex-husband Thomas Anderson, who had brought his own family to watch the taping as part of a California vacation. Thomas and Rebecca had been divorced for 5 years, and their split had been what everyone called amicable, with shared custody of their children and a relationship that had transitioned smoothly from marriage to co-parenting friendship. Rebecca and Thomas had been married for 12 years before their divorce, and from the outside, their marriage had seemed solid and enviable. They had met in college, married young, built careers, bought a house in a good neighborhood, and raised 2 children together. When they announced their separation, friends and family had been shocked because there had been no obvious signs of trouble. No fights, no affairs, no dramatic incidents that usually preceded divorce. Rebecca and Thomas had simply explained that they had grown apart, that they wanted different things from life, and that they had decided to end their marriage while they could still remain friends for the sake of their children. Everyone had accepted this explanation because it seemed mature and reasonable, the kind of conscious uncoupling that modern couples aspired to achieve. The divorce had proceeded smoothly, assets were divided fairly, custody arrangements were established without conflict, and within a year, both Rebecca and Thomas had moved on to new relationships. Rebecca had married Michael, a corporate attorney who treated her children well and seemed to make her happy. Thomas had started dating a teacher named Sarah, and they had recently gotten engaged. What nobody knew, what Rebecca had never told anyone except her therapist, was the real reason for the divorce. The truth was so painful and so contrary to the image Rebecca had carefully constructed that she had chosen to protect herself and Thomas by creating a more palatable narrative. The real story was that Thomas had been living a double life throughout their entire marriage. Not an affair in the traditional sense, but something that Rebecca had discovered accidentally and had been unable to forgive or forget. Thomas had been secretly supporting his ex-girlfriend and her child, a daughter who was actually his biological child from a relationship that had overlapped with the early months of his relationship with Rebecca. Thomas had never told Rebecca about this child, had hidden the financial support payments, and had been visiting this other family regularly under the guise of business trips and weekend golf outings with friends. When Rebecca had discovered the truth through a misplaced bank statement, her entire understanding of her marriage had shattered. The man she thought she knew, the father of her children, the partner she had trusted completely, had been living a lie for over a decade. The confrontation that followed had been devastating. Thomas had broken down, admitted everything, and begged for forgiveness. He explained that he had gotten his ex-girlfriend pregnant before he and Rebecca had become exclusive, but he had chosen Rebecca because he loved her more. When the ex-girlfriend had the baby and asked for his support, Thomas had felt obligated to help, but had been too afraid to tell Rebecca the truth. One lie had led to another, and before he knew it, he was trapped in a web of deception that grew more complicated with each passing year. He had two families, neither of whom knew about the other, and he had spent 12 years juggling the emotional and financial demands of both. Rebecca had been faced with an impossible choice. She could expose Thomas, destroy his reputation, make their divorce bitter and public, and force their children to learn that their father had another child he had been hiding from them. Or she could protect everyone, including herself, by creating a clean break with a story that allowed everyone to move forward with dignity intact. Rebecca had chosen the latter, not because she forgave Thomas, but because she understood that the truth would hurt too many innocent people, especially the children involved. The divorce settlement had included a confidentiality clause that Rebecca had insisted upon, not to protect Thomas, but to protect herself and their children from the inevitable questions and judgment that would follow if the truth became public. Thomas had agreed to everything Rebecca demanded, grateful that she was not destroying him publicly. He had promised to be honest with his next partner about his other daughter, and as far as Rebecca knew, he had kept that promise with Sarah. The two families had moved on, Rebecca had rebuilt her life with Michael, and the painful chapter seemed closed. Until today, when random chance had placed Thomas in the Family Feud audience, watching his ex-wife compete on national television. The game began normally enough, with both families playing well and Steve Harvey delivering his usual mix of humor and encouragement. Rebecca was a strong player, buzzing in quickly and giving confident answers that showed she understood how the game worked. Her children were clearly proud of her, and Michael supported her with the kind of attentive partnership that suggested their marriage was solid. Steve noticed the family's chemistry and commented on it during a break between rounds, asking Rebecca how long she had been married to Michael. Rebecca smiled and said, 3 years, but we have a blended family. I have 2 children from my previous marriage, and we all get along great. Steve nodded approvingly and said, that's beautiful. Blended families can be challenging, but when they work, there's something special. Are you still on good terms with your ex-husband? It was an innocent question, the kind of small talk that filled the spaces between game play. Rebecca answered smoothly, yes, we have a very friendly relationship. We both wanted what was best for our kids, so we made sure the divorce was amicable. No drama, no fighting, just 2 people who realized they were better as friends than as spouses. Steve smiled and was about to move on when something unexpected happened. A voice from the audience called out, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. That's not exactly true, Rebecca. The studio fell silent as everyone turned to see who had spoken. Thomas Anderson was standing in the audience section, his face flushed with emotion, clearly struggling with whether to continue. Steve's expression changed from confusion to concern as he tried to understand what was happening. Do you know this contestant? Steve asked, his voice taking on the careful tone of someone sensing that a situation was about to become complicated. Thomas nodded and said, she's my ex-wife. Those are my children standing with her. Steve looked at Rebecca, whose face had gone completely pale, and then back at Thomas. The audience was utterly silent, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary. Steve made a quick decision and said to the production team, hold the game for a minute. I need to understand what's happening here. He turned to Thomas and said, sir, I'm going to ask you to please explain what you meant when you said that wasn't exactly true. Thomas took a deep breath, and in that moment, Rebecca knew that the secret she had protected for 5 years was about to be exposed to millions of people. She wanted to stop him, to remind him of the confidentiality agreement, to protect their children who were standing right beside her watching this unfold. But she also felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight she had been carrying for years was finally about to be lifted. Thomas spoke, his voice shaking with emotion. Rebecca told everyone that we grew apart, that we wanted different things from life. But that's not why we got divorced. We got divorced because she found out that I had another child, a daughter from a previous relationship that I never told her about. I had been supporting this child and her mother financially throughout our entire marriage, visiting them, being a father to her, all while lying to Rebecca about where I was and what I was doing. The studio erupted in gasps and murmurs. Rebecca's children looked at their mother with expressions of shock and confusion. Michael moved closer to Rebecca, instinctively protective. Steve Harvey stood frozen, his usual quick wit completely abandoned as he processed what he had just heard. Finally, Steve found his voice and said, sir, I need you to stop right there. This is a lot of personal information being shared on national television, and I'm not sure this is the right place for this conversation. But Thomas shook his head and continued, seeming unable to stop now that he had started. I need to say this, Mr. Harvey. I need Rebecca and everyone to know the truth. She protected me. When she found out about my lies, she could have destroyed me. She could have told everyone what I had done, made the divorce ugly, turned our children against me, but she didn't. She created a story that let us both move forward with dignity. She put our children first, even though I had betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. Steve turned to Rebecca, who was crying now, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Ma'am, is this true? He asked gently. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. Steve looked at the children standing beside their mother, teenagers who were now learning for the first time that their father had a sister they had never known about, and his expression showed the weight of understanding how complicated this situation had become. He turned to the production team and said something that would become legendary in Family Feud history. We need to stop taping. Right now. This is too important to handle as part of a game show. The producers quickly cleared the studio of the other family and the audience members who were not directly involved, giving the Anderson family privacy for what was clearly going to be a difficult conversation. Steve asked both Rebecca and Thomas to join him on stage, along with Rebecca's current husband Michael and the two children. What happened next was not filmed for broadcast, but everyone present would later describe it as one of the most powerful moments they had ever witnessed. Steve, who had built a career on humor and entertainment, transformed into something else entirely, a counselor and mediator helping a family navigate the revelation of a painful truth. Thomas explained everything. The daughter he had been hiding was now 17 years old, just a year younger than his son with Rebecca. Her name was Emma, and she lived with her mother in a city 2 hours away from where Thomas and Rebecca had lived during their marriage. Thomas had been visiting Emma regularly, attending her school events, helping pay for her education, being a father to her in every way except publicly acknowledging her existence. He had justified his secrecy by telling himself that he was protecting everyone involved, that the truth would hurt too many people. But over the years, the lies had eaten away at him, creating a distance in his marriage that Rebecca had sensed, but could not understand because she did not know its source. When Rebecca discovered the truth and chose to divorce him quietly, Thomas had felt relieved but also ashamed. He had moved forward with his life, started a new relationship with Sarah, and had been honest with her about Emma from the beginning. Sarah had accepted Emma as part of Thomas's life, and they had developed a relationship with her and her mother. Rebecca listened to Thomas explain all of this, and then she spoke, her voice steady despite her tears. I want everyone to understand why I never told this story. It wasn't to protect Thomas. It was to protect our children. I didn't want them to grow up knowing their father had lied to everyone for years. I didn't want them to have to explain to their friends why they had a half-sister they had never met. I didn't want them to question every memory of their childhood, wondering what else had been a lie. She looked at her children, who were both crying now, and continued. I thought I was doing the right thing by giving you a clean story about why your father and I divorced, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe the truth, as painful as it is better than a comfortable lie. Steve Harvey, who had been listening carefully to everything being said, finally spoke. His words would later be quoted in articles about parenting, divorce, and the complexity of family relationships. Rebecca, I want to tell you something. What you did, protecting your children from a painful truth, that came from a place of love. But Thomas is right about one thing. You also protected him when you didn't have to. That took strength and grace that most people don't have. He turned to Thomas and his expression hardened. But you, sir, you created this situation. You lied to your wife for 12 years. You had a whole other child that you kept secret. And then you let Rebecca take the burden of creating a story that made you look better than you deserved to look. Steve continued, addressing the children now. Your mother made a choice 5 years ago to protect you from a difficult truth. Whether that was the right choice or not, we can debate. But what's happening right now is that you're learning something important about both of your parents. Your father made serious mistakes, but he's also been a father to a girl who needed him. Your mother chose grace over revenge. These are complicated truths about complicated people, and you're old enough now to understand that parents are human beings who make mistakes and difficult choices. He paused and then asked the question that everyone was wondering. Thomas, why did you say something today? Why expose this secret now in this place? Thomas wiped his eyes and said, Because I'm getting married in 3 months, and Emma is going to be in my wedding. My children deserve to know about their sister before they see her standing up there with us. And Rebecca deserves to have the truth told about why our marriage ended. I've watched her carry this secret for 5 years, watched her protect me when I didn't deserve protection. It wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't fair to our children. I should have been the one to tell this story years ago, but I was a coward. When I heard Rebecca tell you that our divorce was amicable because we grew apart, I realized I couldn't let that lie stand anymore. The conversation that followed was emotional and difficult, but also healing in unexpected ways. Rebecca's children asked questions about their half-sister Emma, wanting to know about her, whether she looked like them, what kind of person she was. Thomas showed them pictures on his phone, and they saw a girl who shared their features, their smile, their father's eyes. Rebecca's current husband Michael spoke about the burden Rebecca had carried in their marriage, the secret that had created a wall she could not fully explain. He told Rebecca that he admired her strength, but wished she had felt she could share the truth with him. Rebecca admitted that the secret had been isolating, that she had carried shame that did not belong to her, shame about being betrayed rather than anger at the person who had betrayed her. Steve facilitated this conversation with remarkable sensitivity, asking questions that helped everyone express what they were feeling, making sure each person felt heard. He shared his own experiences with complicated family situations, with mistakes made and forgiven, with the messy reality that exists behind most families' public faces. He told them that what was happening, as painful as it was, might be the beginning of something better, a chance to build relationships on truth rather than on carefully constructed stories. When the conversation finally wound down, Steve made a decision about how to proceed. He told the Anderson family that they could choose whether or not the game would continue, whether they wanted to finish competing or simply take their experience and leave. Rebecca looked at her children and asked them what they wanted to do. Her daughter spoke first, saying, "I think we should finish the game. We came here as a family, and we're still a family, even if we just learned some really hard things about our family history." The game resumed, but it was different now. The audience members who had witnessed the revelation looked at the Anderson family with new eyes, with compassion and respect for what they had just navigated. The Martinez family, their competitors, approached the Anderson family during a commercial break and expressed support and admiration for their courage. When play resumed, both families seemed to be playing not against each other, but in solidarity with each other, understanding that what mattered was not winning a game, but how we treat each other during difficult moments. The questions that came up seemed almost too perfectly aligned with what had just happened. When Steve asked, "Name something that's important to tell the truth about," Rebecca buzzed in and said, "Your past," and it was the number one answer. When he asked, "Name something that takes courage," one of Rebecca's children answered, "Admitting you made a mistake," and again it was at the top of the board. The Anderson family ended up winning the game, and when they advanced to fast money, Rebecca insisted that her children play instead of the adults. "This is their moment," she said. They just learned something that changed their understanding of their family, and they handled it with maturity and grace. They deserve this. Her children played fast money together, and while they did not score high enough to win the full prize, the effort and love they showed for each other was worth more than any amount of money. When the taping concluded, something unprecedented happened. Thomas came onto the stage and approached Rebecca for the first time in 5 years. In front of everyone, he said, "Thank you for protecting our children all these years. And I'm sorry I put you in a position where you had to choose between the truth and their innocence. You deserved better than what I gave you." Rebecca looked at the man she had once loved, the man who had betrayed her, the man whose lies had shaped the last 5 years of her life, and she said something that showed remarkable wisdom and maturity. "Thomas, you made terrible choices. But you also have been a father to Emma, and that matters. Our children have a sister, and that's a gift even if it came from complicated circumstances. I'm glad the truth is finally out. I'm tired of carrying secrets that aren't mine to carry." She turned to her children and said, "I want you to meet your sister. When you're ready, when you've had time to process all of this, I want you to know Emma and have a relationship with her if that's what you want. She's your family, and family matters." The episode that eventually aired was edited carefully to respect the privacy of everyone involved, while still capturing the essential truth of what had happened. The producers worked with both Rebecca and Thomas to determine what could be shown and what needed to remain private. The final version included the revelation, Steve's response, and the family's decision to finish the game, but the details of the private conversation were kept confidential. Despite the editing, the episode became one of the most talked about in Family Feud history, sparking national conversations about divorce, blended families, secrets, and the complicated nature of truth-telling in family relationships. Rebecca's decision to allow the truth to be revealed, and her graceful response to it, inspired countless viewers who were dealing with their own family secrets and complicated relationships. Divorce counselors used the episode as a teaching tool about how to handle difficult revelations and protect children while also honoring truth. Therapists discussed the burden of carrying secrets and the relief that can come from truth, even painful truth. Parenting experts debated whether Rebecca had been right to hide the truth from her children for 5 years or whether honesty, even about difficult subjects, is always the better choice for family relationships. For Rebecca personally, the revelation was transformative in unexpected ways. The secret she had carried for 5 years, the shame and anger she had buried, the story she had carefully maintained, all of it was suddenly gone. She no longer had to remember which version of events she had told to which person. She no longer had to maintain the fiction that her divorce had been amicable and mutual. She could acknowledge that she had been betrayed, that she had been hurt, and that she had survived anyway. Her relationship with Michael deepened as she was finally able to share the full truth of her past with him. Her children, after the initial shock and hurt, developed a relationship with their half-sister Emma that enriched all of their lives. Thomas faced consequences for his revelation as well, though different ones than he might have expected. Some people admired his courage in finally telling the truth, while others criticized him for creating the situation in the first place, and for revealing it so publicly without giving Rebecca a choice in the matter. His relationship with Sarah faced strain as she confronted the reality that while Thomas had been honest with her about Emma, he had not been fully honest about the circumstances of his divorce from Rebecca. They worked through it in couples therapy, eventually moving forward with their marriage with a new commitment to complete honesty. Emma herself, who had known about her half-siblings but had never met them, was thrilled to finally have a relationship with them, though she also struggled with complicated feelings about being the secret that had destroyed her father's marriage. 2 years after the episode aired, the three siblings, Rebecca's 2 children and Emma, appeared together on Steve Harvey's talk show to discuss their experience. They talked about the difficulty of learning about each other, the awkwardness of first meetings, the gradual building of trust and affection. They described themselves as living proof that families are complicated, that siblings can love each other even when their existence was once a secret, and that truth, while painful, creates the foundation for authentic relationships. Rebecca appeared on the show as well, and Steve asked her if she regretted the way everything had unfolded. She thought carefully before answering and then said, "I don't regret protecting my children when they were younger. But I'm grateful that the truth came out when they were old enough to handle it. I wish it hadn't happened on national television, but maybe that public nature of it meant we all had to face it directly instead of letting it fester privately for more years." The story of Rebecca and Thomas became a case study in modern family complexity, discussed in sociology classes, family therapy training programs, and divorce mediation courses. It challenged simple narratives about good guys and bad guys, showing instead the messy reality where someone can be both a devoted father and a serial liar, where someone can choose grace while also carrying justified anger, where the truth can hurt and heal simultaneously. It demonstrated that families can survive revelations that seem devastating, that children are often more resilient than we give them credit for, and that honesty, while difficult, creates possibilities for authentic connection that secrets prevent. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the secrets you carry or the truths you have been avoiding, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that truth, even painful truth, creates the foundation for real relationships. Comment below about your own experience with family secrets or difficult revelations. The story of Rebecca and Thomas reminds us that we are all more complicated than we appear, that grace and accountability can coexist, and that families can heal from even the most devastating betrayals when truth is finally honored. Steve Harvey stopped that game because he recognized that some moments are too important to treat as entertainment. That truth deserves to be witnessed and respected, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is create space for people to be honest about the messy, complicated reality of their lives.